system that is open to the world and is fair, where we welcome the best and the brightest through a points-based system, the brilliant, dedicated doctors and nurses now able to come and use our fast-track visas to work in the NHS, and the brightest and the best scientists and academics who now benefit from the global talent route straight to the UK. This is our new plan for immigration in practice. Cracking down on the people smugglers means that we will have the capacity to help those genuinely fleeing fear of their lives. Safe and legal routes, like the ones for Ukrainians displaced by Putin's war, are preferable to the dangerous journeys across the Channel organised by criminal gangs. And we have added measures to the National Anti-Borders Bill, introducing new visa penalty provisions for countries that pose a risk to international peace and our security. Accommodation and other resources are not unlimited. We will be less able to help those in most need if we do not control our borders. And all states have a responsibility to have planned and controlled migration and asylum. And to sustain them, that system, all of it, it has to be a fair one. And this government promised to regain sovereignty, and we have made immigration and asylum policy a priority. Which is why what is happening in the Channel with small boats is unsafe, unfair and unacceptable. The cause of this relentless flow of migrants landing on our shores are the vile people smugglers, characterised by ruthlessness and greed. Now, I know you feel angry and frustrated about this. I do too. This is not a challenge unique to the UK, but now we have left the EU, global Britain has a responsibility to act and address the problems that for too long have been neglected. So you rightly ask, what am I doing to change things? At the heart of our new plan for immigration is a simple principle: fairness. Access to the UK's asylum system should be based on need and not on the ability to pay people smugglers. If you enter the UK illegally via a safe country in which you could have claimed asylum, you're not seeking refuge from imminent peril, but you are picking the UK as a preferred destination. The present maximum sentence for people smugglers is 15 years. We are changing that through our bill to make it life. The use of hotels. The use of hotels to accommodate arrivals will end, and we will bring forward plans to expand the government's asylum estate to accommodate and process asylum seekers, including for return to a safe country. For the first time, whether you enter the UK legally or illegally will impact on how your asylum claim progresses and on your status in the UK if your claim is successful. We will also introduce robust approaches to age assessments against adults claiming to be children. And it's through these and many other measures, my friend, in the National Anti-Borders Bill, which will return to Parliament next Tuesday, that will bring lasting changes to this broken system, which is currently the right thing to do, because what we must do is be fair to those who need our support and firm on those who abuse our laws. The Home Secretary's primary responsibility is the security of our nation. Now, some of you may have heard or noticed the calls for me to suspend national security processes on people have grown louder in recent weeks. But there are very good reasons as to why Ukrainian refugees must come here safely and legally. I've been asked, why couldn't we suspend security checks on people escaping Putin's war? Times of conflict, my friends, emphasise our need to remain watchful. Now, I know from the briefings I receive from the intelligence and security services that instability around the world brings with it greater threats. I sign daily warrants from our security and intelligence agencies relating to extreme danger this country faces from all kinds of terrorism, serious organised crime, and state threats. Only 4 years ago, the Russian military intelligence services used a chemical weapon on British soil. It happened in Salisbury, a beautiful city whose inhabitants would have felt completely safe. Dawn Sturgis could never have imagined that she would lose her life to Novichok. The truth is that a very small number of people can wreak utter havoc. And Russia has a history of covert, hostile activity. And I'm afraid it is naive and misguided to think that only men can be covert operatives, or that refugee flows would not be subject to some form of exploitation. There are those who would come to our country, to this country, who would mean us harm, and who plot to strike at our very way of life. The processes that we have put in place closely follow the advice of our intelligence and security services. They mean we can help Ukrainians in need without making our country less safe. State threats and terrorism take many forms. They also thrive on indifference and on appeasement. And now we are seeing them supplemented by new types of targeted biological, chemical, cyber warfare, ransomware, and online threats. Our duty is to safeguard our country's interests, and we will never take our eye off the ball when it comes to the safety and security of our country. Rightly, our focus is on the current crisis in Ukraine. However, at home, we continue to deliver on the people's priorities, for which many of you, my friends, campaigned so hard on in 2019. The safety and security of our communities and citizens is paramount. Crime has unspeakable consequences on those whose lives are scarred by appalling acts of crime, abuse, and violence. Our approach to crime will always be based upon seeking justice for victims, but also ensuring that perpetrators are subject to the full force of the law. Since we met in Manchester, we have continued to back our police with funding, resources, and importantly, the laws they need to keep our country safe. Through our Beating Crime plan, we are well over halfway our target of recruiting 20,000 police officers. We are pursuing the appalling scourge of drugs, and our actions on targeting county lines and the drug gangs are working as law enforcement go after the kingpins behind the deadly supply lines. To cut crime, we must cut down on drug use, which is why we have expanded support for drug testing on arrest. Illegal drugs are responsible for murders, serious violence, and neighbourhood crimes. And we will continue to reform police accountability, performance and transparency to ensure that their focus is that of the British people, which is to prevent and to cut crime. And our approach, my friends, is working. Our approach is that of cutting crimes, including theft, burglary and knife crime, all of which are down. I will continue to be relentless in the pursuit of criminals to ensure that everyone, every community can be safe and that our streets and neighbourhood are free of crime. Friends, I began my remarks by sharing with you what I saw 2 weeks ago in Poland. What I saw there, through the acts of kindness and care, were the very universal values which we as Conservatives hold dear to our hearts. The preciousness of freedom, safety and security, which unite and bring us together. We value the enormous benefits of living in a free and safe society, and we must always be resolute in our determination to safeguard them. What is happening in Ukraine is the saddest reminder of the depths to which humanity can sink to strike out those values. Our duty is to safeguard our country's interests and to be reliable and supportive to our friends who share our values. It is right that we do everything that we can to help Ukraine in this hour of need. And my friends, it's not just for their peace, freedom and security, but for the very values and the freedoms we all cherish and live our lives by. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Isn't it fantastic?
Let's welcome the Secretary of State for Defence, Ben Wallace.
Good morning. How lovely to be here. Sun always shines up here, especially on Tories, I've always noticed. Before I begin, can I just ask that we all give a very warm welcome to the Ukrainian ambassador, Vladimir Priti. Come again, Vadim, if I get a standing ovation every time you walk in the room. Vadim, we're extremely pleased to welcome you here today, and I know how much work you do behind the scenes to not only build the consensus for the support for your brave people, but also help deliver real action in that support in that country. And, Conference, I can't tell you how nice it is to be here, how genuinely nice it is to be home. Not only because Blackpool is next to my wonderful constituency of Wyre and Preston North, but also because Lancashire is where I live. It's because as a county, it's one of the places that's helped shape the modern Conservative Party. And I know that if we can win in Lancashire, we can win in the country. Every year in this town, veterans of my regiment, the Scots Guards, meet here to remember the Falkland Islands and the Battle of Tumbledown. This year it will be especially important for them as we mark the 40th anniversary of the liberation of the Falkland Islands from the grip of the Argentinian military dictator, General Galtieri. Many said it couldn't be done, that sending a force 8,000 miles to the South Atlantic was an impossible task. But history is littered with those that underestimate this plucky island. General Galtieri was not the first dictator to underestimate us. And while many here will remember the amazing Sea Harrier and the battles of Tumbledown, Goose Green, Mount Kent, we will also sadly remember the 255 British lives lost, and actually also the lives of the young Argentinians who were sent needlessly to their deaths in order to save a dictator's political position. Sounds a bit familiar. There were many standout contributions to that campaign. But Margaret Thatcher stood out for her leadership and determination to stand up for the values and freedoms we all hold so dear. By her leadership, she equipped the forces with the most important weapon of all, the moral component. That deep sense that we were fighting for what was legal, justified and right. And today that same moral component is what is arming the men and women of Ukraine. Who would have thought that after 31 years after the end of the Cold War, we would once again be facing such a direct threat to our freedoms and values? As we gather here today, we should spare a thought for the brave Ukrainians fighting the occupying forces of Russia, as we are lucky enough to sit here in comfort. I'm proud of what the UK has done to add to that moral fight. Through Boris Johnson's leadership on sanctions and military aid, Britain has led the way. Since 2015, we have helped train Ukrainian forces, underwritten equipment sales when no one else would. And we were the first in Europe to join the US in sending defensive weapons to the forces of Ukraine. To date, we have sent over 4,000 of our new anti-tank lightweight missile, known as the NLAWs. A further consignment of Javelin and anti-tank missiles, and thousands of items of body armour and other defensive equipment. But we've also led, alongside Poland and the US, the distribution of many other nations' donations. And just like in 1982, Putin's arrogant assumptions have directly led to the casualties and attrition amongst the Russian army. The Kremlin assumed that Ukraine would not fight. He was wrong. The Kremlin assumed his army was invincible. They were wrong. And they assumed the international community would splinter, and they've been proven wrong. We've never been more united on sanctions, on military aid, and in NATO. The deaths of so many young Russian soldiers are the responsibility of the Kremlin. During the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, mothers of those killed in action called the dead boys boys in zinc because of the zinc coffins that their bodies came back in. None of us should let today's Russian president forget that despite dozens of presidents and prime ministers urging him not to invade, the international community called for peace. He chose zinc. The UK can and will do more to help Ukraine, and that's why last week I announced that we should be upgrading our aid to include the Starstreak anti-air missile. But the UK is not going to just stop there. We are standing by our NATO and European partners, countries such as Poland, Romania and the Baltic states who border the conflict. President Putin has been clear in his threats that all of us are at risk. So in the last few months, I've sent 450 soldiers to Poland to help with engineering, air defence and humanitarian tasks. We've also added another battle group in Estonia and at the same time increased Typhoon and F-35 deployments over Romania and Bulgaria. Typhoon jets that are, by the way, made in Lancashire. Conference, I used to joke to my officials that defence never sleeps. Turns out my joke is a little flat, because it turns out to be true. Over the last 3 years, we've been in the forefront of the COVID response, the evacuation in Afghanistan and op pitting, and now in Ukraine. My team of excellent ministers, Baroness Goldie, Jeremy Quinn, James Heapy and Leo Doherty, never stop working and delivering, both on operations and on defence reforms. I simply couldn't do it without the team I have. But even before the events of the last 2 years, the Prime Minister generously gave us a defence settlement, the greatest since the Cold War, an extra £24 billion over the next 4 years. This has enabled us once again to make sure that we have the proper defence programme and reform that puts men and women of the armed forces at the heart of all we do. The Defence Command paper we published in March was very timely, and many of the reforms we're delivering are the right for this competitive age. But defence isn't just about the front line. It's also about everything else that goes on behind it. The defence industry, the training, the skills, the civil servants and the veteran services. Behind every front line is a strong support base. The failures of the Russian army in Ukraine show us that. Unless you invest in the people, then nothing can be achieved. Defence and levelling up go hand in hand. As a Lancashire MP, I'm incredibly proud of our Prime Minister's determination to level up across the whole of the UK and to invest in skills and jobs up and down the country. And after COVID, we all have that duty to build back better. Through the Ministry of Defence is industrial strategy that we've also recently published. We're supporting with £6.6 billion of investment into R&D to make sure that the UK continues to have a competitive, innovative and world-class defence and security industry. And that will underpin our national security, drive investment and prosperity across the Union and contribute to strategic advantage through science and technology. A great example of that is the new Defence Science and Technology Laboratory due to be opened next week in Newcastle. The location of the unit, with its proximity to world-class universities with a high proportion of STEM and computing students, will allow it to thrive, supporting world-class defence development from within the heart of Newcastle, whilst also supporting new jobs in the North East. Newcastle is DSTL's first established science and technology hub and will specialise in artificial intelligence and data science. A1 AI data science will benefit from an extra £142 million investment from DSTL over the next 4 years. This is not the only new defence investment taking root in the north. Last autumn, I announced that the recently established National Cyber Force will be permanently based in Samlesbury, Lancashire. The site will continue to contribute to national security whilst also boosting skills and employment and investment for the next age into the local area. It will be backed by £5 billion of investment to 2030. It will be jointly run by the Ministry of Defence and GCHQ. The site will be, as I've said, at Samlesbury, nestled between Blackburn, Preston, Bolton and Burnley, and will create thousands of new skilled jobs in a region with award-winning further education colleges, world-class universities, thriving defence and an aerospace sector. Labour talk, we deliver. But that's not all. A further delivery against the government's pledge to level up and decentralise. And I can announce today that the new home of the Defence Business Services, that's the organisation that supports the MOD's financial and HR services as well as veterans, will be based right here in Blackpool. I remember being an MP in opposition to Labour. I never saw any of that investment in Lancashire. I saw lots of talk, but it always ended up somewhere in London. Conference. Last year, Labour claimed that our new plan for UK defence risked, and I quote, that the UK was going to be out of step with our NATO allies. But quite the contrary. The principles set out in the Prime Minister's integrated review have served NATO and our allies well in this dark hour. And of course, I welcome that our policy has attracted support from across the House. But let's not forget, many members of Labour's front bench were also on the front bench of Jeremy Corbyn, who wanted to abolish NATO and blamed the West for Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014. I remember going up to Barron-Furness, where I was told by some Labour politicians that under Jeremy Corbyn there would still be submarines to be made so that tourists could go and look at the seabed. In contrast, the year of the Falklands conflict, Mrs Thatcher told the Conservative Party conference that peace, freedom and justice are only to be found where people are prepared to defend them. That remains the case today. "40 years ago, the 74 days of the Falklands conflict tested the resolve of the British nation. But freedom prevailed. I'm proud that we see today the same resolve across all our generations, standing in support of Ukraine. Slava Ukraini." Thank you very much. Come.
Please welcome the Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss.
Conference. As we meet here in Blackpool, we face a different world from the one we've known over the past decades. Putin's illegal, unprovoked invasion of Ukraine has shattered the notion that freedom is free. It's shattered our post-Cold War complacency, and it's shattered our collective security. I'm proud that in this moment of peril, the Prime Minister and this Conservative government have stepped up to lead. We've stepped up by providing lethal aid to Ukraine. We were the first European nation to do so, supporting with NLAW anti-tank weapons, and now with anti-aircraft weapons. We've stepped up by leading the global effort on sanctions, hitting banks and oligarchs, targeting mansions, yachts and aircraft, cutting Russia out of SWIFT, and leading the calls for Nord Stream 2 to be cancelled. Our sanctions are crippling the Russian economy that funds Putin's war machine. And we've stepped up our leadership on humanitarian aid. We're the second largest aid donor, providing everything from generators to blankets to food. And British people across the country are offering their home to support Ukrainian people in need. That's exactly what British foreign policy is. We stand up to bullies. We fight for freedom. We galvanise our allies around the world. As Conservatives, we have a deep responsibility to protect our historic liberties and our democracy. We have a history of standing up to dictators. We're proud that it was a Conservative government that helped end the Cold War and bring down the Berlin Wall. We signed the Budapest Memorandum in 1994, protecting Ukraine's sovereignty. We cannot stand by and see these precious freedoms eroded and the clock turned back to the horrific oppression of the Soviet era. We cannot and we will not rest until Ukraine's sovereignty is restored. In our belief in freedom and democracy, we are joined by our friends from Ukraine. We've been inspired by the incredible leadership of President Zelensky and the bravery of the Ukrainian people. I am delighted that we are joined today by their fantastic ambassador, Priti. Ambassador, your country and your president have the admiration and respect of everyone here in Britain. Our two nations understand how precious freedom is and what it means to fight for it. Our friends in Ukraine see and understand the strength of our support. I hear that some people in Ukraine sing God Save the Queen as they use British equipment. Well, Ambassador, everyone in the United Kingdom is saying Slava Ukraini. Our foreign policy is about standing up for freedom and democracy and Britain's national interest. That's why we've worked so hard to secure the release of our citizens, Nazanin and Anousheh, from Iran. I was delighted to welcome them back home to Britain in the early hours of Thursday morning. And it's also why we're determined to fix the Northern Ireland Protocol and restore the balance of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. We need more flexibility from the EU, and we are prepared to do what it takes to protect the United Kingdom and ensure that all communities in Northern Ireland are treated fairly. Now is the time conference to value what we have. This crisis has shown the strength of the free world. It's shown the strength of democratic, free societies acting decisively in unison. They are more powerful and more determined. Contrast the motivated Ukrainian freedom fighters with Putin's demoralized, misled soldiers. Contrast the decisive, crippling sanctions imposed by the G7, from the United Kingdom to Japan to the EU and the US, with the weak Russian economy and the scant support they are getting internationally. Contrast the spontaneous outburst of solidarity with Ukraine spreading across the world with the tired lies emanating from Putin's propaganda machine. When we are free to speak out, when we can choose our own government, when we control our own money, it makes our nation stronger. When people are free to choose, they choose freedom. And this strength is being shown right across the world, from South Korea to Canada to Germany to Japan to the United States. And that is what we as Conservatives stand for. This is what is important. This is what matters. We have to be proud of our country and our long-standing commitment to freedom and democracy. Now is the time to end the culture of self-doubt, the constant self-questioning and introspection, the ludicrous debates about languages, statues and pronouns. Our history, warts and all, is what makes us what we are today. We live in a great country, a great democracy, and we should be proud of it. When we're facing a tyrant like Vladimir Putin, the only thing he understands is strength. We need to stand up for our societies, and we must never let our guard down again. Our new trade and security deals are with our allies, not our opponents. That's why AUKUS is so important, helping our Australian friends acquire the nuclear submarines they need to defend their territory. That's why NATO is so important, and it's why we're strengthening it for a new era. The UK is the biggest European spender in NATO, and we're building up our support, our troops in Estonia and Poland. The United Kingdom needs to be strong economically as well as militarily. And that's why we need to drive economic growth through supply-side reform. We're using our Brexit freedoms to strike new trade deals, slash red tape, and create new free ports. We're ending our dependency on authoritarian regimes. The West focused on cheap goods at the expense of freedom and security. Never again. We're banning Russian oil from our markets. We've ripped Huawei out of our phone networks, and we have new vigilance on our critical supply chains. We have seen the most horrific, horrible scenes in Ukraine. We have seen a war in Europe for the first time in decades, and we're seeing incredible bravery from the Ukrainians and deeds of valor that will be written about for generations to come. Britain has stepped up. Now we must do even more. Putin must lose in Ukraine, and with Britain at the forefront, we will ensure he does. Thank you.
our worst fears have now come true. President Putin of Russia has unleashed war in our European continent. This crisis is about the right of a free, sovereign, independent European people to choose their own future. And that is a right that the UK will always defend. The UK is announcing the largest and most severe package of economic sanctions that Russia has ever seen. We will continue on a remorseless mission to squeeze Russia from the global economy piece by piece, day by day, and week by week. To our Ukrainian friends, in this moment of agony, I say that we are with you and we are on your side. Now, what we're doing is everything we can to support the Ukrainians with defensive military equipment. And we were the first European country to do so. We've trained 22,000 Ukrainian troops. We sent more than 2,000 anti-tank weapons, and we will do more.
48 new hospitals, 50,000 more nurses, 50 million more GP appointments, 40 new diagnostic centres, and fixing those backlogs with real change. Levelling up means fighting crime, putting more police out on the beat, as we are, toughening sentences, giving the police the powers they need.
The UK recovering faster than our major competitors. Stronger public finances with our debt under control. Stronger employment with fewer people out of work and more people in work. Growth up, jobs up and debt down. Our plan is working.
You'll find talent, genius, flair, imagination, enthusiasm everywhere in this country, all of them evenly distributed, but opportunity is not. And it is our mission as Conservatives to promote opportunity with every tool we have.
Please welcome the Prime Minister.
Thank you. Morning, everybody. Where am I? Here. Morning. Thank you. Morning, everybody. Is this the right one? Hi, everybody. Good morning. Please sit down. Please sit down. Please sit down. Good morning, everybody. It's absolutely fantastic to be back here in Blackpool. Absolutely. I first spoke here. I want you to know I first spoke here 25 years ago. 1997, I was the freshly defeated candidate for Clwyd South, and I did the appeal, but I don't think they could get Jeffrey Archer that day, because we as you will recall, we've been more or less wiped out. And what a joy it is to come back here today, quarter of a century on, and find that we have more Conservative MPs than at any time since the 1980s, and that we not only hold Clwyd South, we hold Blackpool South, my friends. And thank you. As we meet today, a tragedy continues to unfold in our European continent. A vicious and a barbarian attack on innocent civilians, the like of which we haven't seen since the 1940s. And Mr. Ambassador, sir, I know there you are. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, the Ukrainian Ambassador. I want to repeat to you directly what I told your wonderful President Volodymyr Zelensky yesterday. We stand with the Ukrainian people, and our hearts go out to them. And tens of thousands of people in this country are opening our homes to the people of Ukraine. We say thank you to them and we applaud them. And with every day that Ukraine's heroic resistance continues, it is clear that Putin has made a catastrophic mistake. And you have to ask yourself why he did it. Why did he decide to invade this totally innocent country? He didn't really believe that Ukraine was going to join NATO anytime soon. He knew perfectly well there was no plan to put missiles on Ukrainian soil. He didn't really believe the semi-mystical guff he wrote about the origins of the Russian people. I don't know whether you read it, Nostradamus meets Russian Wikipedia. I think that wasn't what it was about. I think he was frightened of Ukraine for an entirely different reason. He was frightened of Ukraine because in Ukraine they have a free press, and in Ukraine they have free elections. And with every year that Ukraine progressed, not always easily, towards freedom and democracy and open markets, he feared the Ukrainian example, and he feared the implicit reproach to himself. Because in Putin's Russia, you get jailed for 15 years just for calling an invasion an invasion. And if you stand against Putin in an election, you get poisoned or shot. And it's precisely, that's what happens. And it's precisely because Ukraine and Russia have been so historically close that he has been terrified of the effect of that Ukrainian model on him and on Russia. And he's been in a total panic about a so-called color revolution in Moscow itself. And that's why he's trying so brutally to snuff out the flame of freedom in Ukraine. And that's why it is so vital that he fails. Because a victorious Putin will not stop in Ukraine, and the end of freedom in Ukraine will mean the extinction of any hope of freedom in Georgia and then Moldova. And it will mean the beginning of a new age of intimidation across the whole of Eastern Europe, from the Baltic to the Black Sea. And if Putin succeeds in crushing Ukraine, it will be the green light for autocrats everywhere, in the Middle East, in the Far East. This is a turning point for the world, and it's a moment of choice. It's a choice between freedom and oppression. And I know there are some around the world, even in some Western governments, who invoke what they call realpolitik, and who say that we're better off making accommodations with tyranny. I have to say I believe they are profoundly wrong. And that to try to re-normalize relations with Putin after this, as we did in 2014, would be to make exactly the same mistake again. And that is why Putin must fail. And I know that it's the instinct of the people of this country, like the people of Ukraine, to choose freedom every time. I can give you a couple of famous recent examples. When the British people voted for Brexit in such large numbers, I don't believe it was because they were remotely hostile to foreigners. It's because they wanted to be free, to do things differently, and for this country to be able to run itself. I'll give you another example. When the British population came forward to be vaccinated at such incredible speed, voluntarily, unlike many other countries. I'm sure it was, of course, partly because they wanted to avoid catching COVID. Very sensible thing to do, by the way. I hope you've all had your boosters. And you have. Well, we're getting ready for a fourth jab because we're going to need it. But I'll tell you why people did it. Why did the British people come forward? I mean, 90% we got, entirely voluntarily. Entirely voluntarily. It was because they wanted to get on with their lives. They were fed up with being told what to do by people like me. They were. We wanted to take back control of our lives, and so I'm proud that this government has done the things that so many people said were impossible. We got Brexit done. I'm proud that we delivered the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe, not once but twice, and the fastest booster rollout. And, of course, yes, I am proud that this government has been in the lead in sticking up for freedom in Ukraine. This was the first European country to send defensive weapons to help the Ukrainians. And now dozens are following our lead. And I'm very grateful to my friend Ben Wallace, also there in the front row, for his foresight many months ago and for getting me to read Putin's crazy essay, which I did. And we're talking continuously, Liz, Ben and I were talking continuously to our colleagues in the Ukraine support group to discuss what more we can do. And those conversations go on literally every day, and there will be more. I'm proud of what we did on sanctions. We were in the lead in sanctioning SWIFT and the banks when banning Aeroflot. We've now sanctioned more banks and individuals than any other European country, and we will be distraining their yachts and their assets. And of course, there is a cost to all these actions. Of course, there is. But the cost of doing nothing would be far, far higher. Putin's war is intended to cause economic damage to the West and to benefit him. And he knows that with every dollar increase in the price of a barrel of oil, he gets billions more in revenues from the sales of oil and gas. And that's the tragedy of the situation. He's been preparing for this moment by pushing hydrocarbons on the West like a backstreet pusher, feeding our addiction, creating a dependency. And now he wants to weaken the collective will to resist by pushing up the cost of living, hitting us at the pumps and in our fuel bills. And so we must respond, and we've got to do everything we can to help people with their daily costs, help people with the cost of living. And of course that means doing all the things that we're doing, lifting the living wage, cutting council tax bills, helping with fuel costs, giving billions to councils, millions more to help people in particular hardship. The best possible answer, of course, is to make sure that, this is the traditional Conservative answer, to make sure that we have a strong economy and strong economic fundamentals with well-paid jobs. And thanks to the speed of that booster rollout, we have the fastest growing economy in the G7. Unemployment now actually back to the level it was before the pandemic, virtually a record low, 3.9%. Youth unemployment at or near record lows. But if we're going to deal with the particular cost, the biggest cost that families now face, and tackle these rising fuel bills, the energy spike, we must take the bold steps necessary to end our dependence on Putin's oil and gas. And that is what we are doing. In the immortal phrase, it is time to take back control of our energy supplies. After years of short-termism and hand-to-mouth solutions, we are setting out a British energy security strategy. And we will make better use of our own naturally occurring hydrocarbons rather than import them top dollar from abroad and put the money into Putin's bank account. That does not mean in any way that we will abandon our drive for a low-carbon future. We're going to make some bets on nuclear power, some big bets on nuclear power, not just the big projects, but also the small modular reactors. And we're going to take that bullet-a-gate spirit of the booster rollout and use it to build more offshore wind at double-quick time, and many other investments in clean, green power. But if you ask me how we're going to pay for all this, I can tell you that I've been going around the world recently, and I've been talking to international investors who are yearning to make colossal long-term investments in British green infrastructure. Colossal. And there's a reason why people want to come to this country, many, many reasons why they want to come, but you're seeing them invest massively in everything from tech to finance to green power. And that is that they know what this government is doing. They know about, I mean, you may not believe it, but they do. They know about our levelling up agenda, my friends. They do. They've heard of it. They have. They're very well informed. And they know that we have a plan to unleash the potential of this whole country, and they can see how we are doing it. making our streets safer with 20,000 more police, rounding up the county lines drugs gangs that cause such misery, stopping and searching the kids with the knives, giving the police the powers that they need, and by the way, giving the criminals the serious sentences that they deserve for the crimes that they commit. Tackling the middle-class drugs use, by the way, that helps to drive so much of the consumption. But doing things... Thank you for that small clap for that. I think it's about time that the government said that we don't tolerate this kind of concern, because it is driving misery across the whole country. It's driving the county lines gangs, and we should be absolutely frank about it. But what we're doing goes far beyond that, and people around the world can see what levelling up is doing. The massive extension of fibre optic broadband, and I'm just trying to look for Nadine. How's Nadine? Perhaps Nadine isn't here. But we are, Oliver. You were doing it. Massive expansion. Massive expansion when you were at DCMS of full fibre gigabit broadband. It is a great thing for our country, and we need to do it. We will go further and faster, investing massively in road and rail, and not just the colossal schemes of the integrated rail plan, Northern Powerhouse Rail, making sure that the Midlands and the north of the country finally get the kind of commuter-style rail networks that have been taken for granted for so long in the southeast. Huge schemes that we're doing. They'll be transformative for the UK economy. But look at the little things that we're doing as well, or relatively smaller schemes, such as the new tram improvements in Blackpool, which I was delighted to see the other day. I congratulate the Blackpool authorities on what they are doing, because it's driving tourism, it's driving investment, even more investment here in Blackpool. And that's what levelling up is. I went for a run. You may not believe it, but I did. I went for a run this morning on the beach. Absolutely beautiful. Better than anything in the Caribbean. That is not mere gallantry. It is true. And it's true. I mean, that time of the morning, 6:45, sun coming up, unbelievable. Tide right out, ribbed sand stretching for miles and miles, and absolutely beautiful. And as I ran along, I saw all the new hotels and the new attractions that will benefit from that new transport infrastructure going in, the new tram. Of course, government has a role: safer streets, better healthcare, better schools, better education, creating the conditions for that investment. But in the end, you need the private sector, the animal spirits of the private sector, to come in and have the confidence to invest. That's what it's all about. That's the fundamental symmetry at the heart of our Conservative vision. And as I was running along the sand, I saw a man who seemed to be prospecting with a kind of steel pole or tube. And I asked him what he was looking for, hydrocarbons, perhaps. And what do you think he was looking for? Does anybody have any idea? I tell you, it wasn't an oil well. No, he was looking for lugworms. And he showed me some lugworms that he had caught. And I will tell you, my friends, that the lugworm is not perhaps the most beautiful of God's creatures. But bigger fish love lugworms. And I want you to know that we Conservatives back everybody in this country who gets up early and invests their time and their skill and their energy and their effort in the hope of a bigger return. And that is... You need to use a lugworm. You need to use a lugworm to catch a bream, my friends. And I have a bream, as they say. I have a bream. I have a bream of a vision of a one-nation conservatism that takes that capitalist spirit and uses our wonderful free market system to make sure that we have the revenues further for Rishi Sunak to pay for our fantastic NHS and the 50,000 more nurses and the thousands more doctors that we're hiring. Pay for all the wonderful staff who are clearing the COVID backlogs. Pay for our defences. Pay for Ben Wallace's troops. Pay for our 20,000 more police officers. Pay for investment in skills, like what we're doing with the Blackpool and Fylde College, the new multiversity that's opening, because that is what levelling up is all about. And it is those wonderful public services that create the climate of confidence, which means that private sector investment comes in. And it works. This formula levelling up, I believe, is right for the whole country. It's vital to understand this. It's vital. It works everywhere. By unleashing talent everywhere across the UK, still under the old model, the most imbalanced European economy. By unleashing talent everywhere, you stop the overheating and the stress and the overdevelopment that is a part of the failed economic model. And we take the whole country forward together. That's what we're going to do. And that's why Rishi, I think, is totally right to be driving a new age of post-Brexit entrepreneurialism. Tough word to say. You know what? But you know what I mean. Low business taxes and other fiscal incentives, the 8 new free ports, and all the new freedoms that we're currently taking, driven by Jacob, who's our invigilator of these things, to do things differently and do things better now that we can. And I think it's because of the spirit that people can see in this country that we're seeing a surge of investment in the last few months. Another $1 billion just this week from Al-Fnaa, from Saudi Arabia in Teesside to make green aviation fuel, top of $1 billion from Nissan for a gigafactory, $1 billion from Mubadala for life sciences, $6 billion for Iberdrola, a Spanish company in East Anglian wind farms, $1.5 billion from Blackstone for labs and the creative sector. The list goes on and on. It is absolutely astonishing. $1 billion here, $1 billion there. You're talking about serious money. You're talking about tens of thousands of high-wage, high-skilled jobs. And there's another reason, of course, why investors come here. And when they think about the UK and what it's going to be like for themselves and their families, they think about the time that they're going to be spending in the UK. And I'll tell you something. It is the invincible strength of this country that we believe, by and large, and within the law, that people should be able to do whatever they want, provided they don't do any harm to anybody else. That's what it is. And that's called freedom. That's called freedom. And we don't need to be woke. We just want to be free. And that's why talented people are fleeing Russia, quite frankly, right now. And that's why they're flocking to the UK. And to get back to my theme, that's Putin's tragedy. That's his tragedy. There's a sense in which his disastrous error in Ukraine is itself an argument for democracy and freedom. I mean, seriously, if Putin had a free press, if he had the BBC on his case, well, let's be serious. He would know, whatever you may think, he would have known the truth. Or a version of it. He would have known the truth. No, come on. If he had free, impartial, responsible journalists, let me put it that way, then he would have known the truth that the Ukrainians are a proud nation with a charismatic leader, and he would have known before he set out on this disastrous and inhuman venture that they would fight to defend their homeland. He would have known that. And he wouldn't have locked himself in this echo chamber of sycophants. On which subject, if Putin had to explain himself to a real parliament with real backbenchers, for whom, of course, all leaders must have a very, very lively regard, backbenchers who had to justify themselves every day to their electors, and of course at elections. You know, I don't believe that he would have been capable of such a crescendo of disastrous and self-destructive mistakes. Isn't that the truth? Yeah. Now look, I've got to tell you, I don't believe that democratic freedoms are going to sprout anytime soon in the Kremlin. Far from it. But with every day that passes, I think that Putin becomes a more glaring advertisement for the system that he hates and despises, and it becomes ever more obvious why we have to stick up for Ukraine. And we will. And that's why we will continue with absolute conviction to stick up for freedom under the law. Freedom under the law at home and abroad, even if it means making some tough decisions. We made a tough choice, for instance, over Christmas and New Year to keep going, to keep our economy open, when some people said we should go back into lockdown. We made the tough choice to open up last July, when I think that the Labour Party said we were being reckless. Never forget, if we'd listened to Captain Hindsight and the Labour Party, I never tire of telling you this, but it's true, we would still be in lockdown, and we would certainly not be seeing the strong growth and employment that we're seeing today. When the Labour Party and the current leader were trying with might and main to install a leader who wanted, I'm serious, to abolish NATO, we were already training Ukrainian troops to fight. And it's an absolutely incredible fact, but it's true. At a time when Russia is being led by a president who's capable of bullying and threats and who's plainly capable of making dangerous and irrational decisions, we have a Labour Party whose shadow cabinet is stuffed with people who only recently voted to abolish the UK's independent nuclear deterrent. That's right, 8 of them. The Shadow Foreign Secretary, unbelievable, the Shadow Levelling Up Secretary, Shadow Transport Secretary, I haven't got the entire list, but you can find it out. That's them. Do we want them in charge, my friends, at this moment? Do we want them running up the white flag? Do you see them standing up to Putin's blackmail? I don't. By the way, in the next few weeks, do we want them running our councils, when we know that up and down the country, Labour councils cost you more and Conservatives deliver better services? Do we want them in charge of the economy of this amazing country of ours, when there has never been a Labour government that left with unemployment lower than when they arrived? Let me tell you, when you go out campaigning in the next few weeks, as we all will, joyfully, let me tell you that my message to everybody on the doorstep is that it is Conservatives. It's Conservatives who get things done even when they look difficult. And it's Conservatives who take the tough decisions to help you, to be on your side, to help you with the cost of living. And it's Conservatives who stand up for freedom against the blackmail of Vladimir Putin. And I'll tell you why we do it. And we do it not out of ideology, because we know through long experience that it's only by sticking up for freedom that we can deliver long-term prosperity and security. And that's what we will deliver together. Thank you all very much, and thank you for coming to Spring Conference. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.